Michael.
Morning, Marion.
Good morning. How are you? Good morning.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you and see you fine.
Can't hear me.
Can you hear me? You can hear me, right?
Can't hear you either.
Oh, you can't hear.
Maybe I can hear. Can I hear you now?
Can you?
No.
Oh.
No hearing.
Also, I want to get a book to prop my computer up a little bit.
Deb, can you hear me?
Hey.
Hi, Debbie. I'll be right back.
Good morning.
Microphone.
Michael, can you
Deb,
hear
can you
me?
hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes, you can hear me. I can't hear you though.
You can't hear me.
Let's see. Why can't I hear you? Dooby-dooby-doo. Go home. Speakers. Say something now.
Hello?
Oh, it's better.
Do you have to turn your volume up?
I've got my new I've got my new microphone, so I had to switch speakers.
I saw you're like a professional.
How does it sound?
Sounds great.
Yeah, okay, good.
I'm gonna mute myself while Dan gets Nora out of this house.
Okay, Rick. Where are you going?
Dan is taking Nora outside because she's throwing a tantrum.
No problem. No problem.
Michael, do you have audio yet?
I got you now, yeah. I got a new microphone, so I had to switch speakers.
Oh, okay. Hi, Hannah.
They're on mute, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, Hannah Berman, right.
Yeah. You got the PowerPoint, right?
Yeah.
Hi, Hannah.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Oops. Who are the people chatting? Okay.
That was just me.
Okay, just was checking. I'll be right back again.
Hannah, where are you speaking from?
Shire, Massachusetts.
Right. Good. Good, good, good. We've had funny weather, haven't we? Snow one day and sun the next.
Yeah, funny everything. Yeah. What else is new, you know? It's like let's see. Oh, Susan.
Morning, Susan.
Good morning.
Boker Tov.
Hi, Hannah. How is everybody?
Wow. Okay. All right, let's see.
Hi, Marion.
Hi, Susan. How are you?
Good. Nice to see everybody.
Yeah.
I'm having withdrawal.
I want to get my screen up to share our welcome and all that kind of good stuff. How's everybody doing?
It's not like we can ask what we did all weekend. Except maybe what book we read.
I can tell you where I went.
Yeah.
I went from my living room and then to my bedroom and then to the family room and then around the block.
I woke up at 5 a.m. and I think it was because today's Patriots Day, and normally at 5 a.m. I wake up to go to the reenactment, and must have been some kind of metaphysical chemistry going on.
I was actually thinking about you with knowing that that's what you usually do. Are they not, they're not doing the reenactment this year, right?
No, they've done a virtual one,
They did?
of course.
Yeah. Good.
Not at 5. I don't think they did it then. I think they're doing it, like, they're doing stuff, you know.
Yeah. I heard on the news this morning, they were really encouraging runners not to run their own marathon, because I guess people were talking about doing that.
Remember, we went last year, Marion. We went, and Debbie, we went to watch
Yeah.
them,
We did.
and we
Yeah.
saw that girl, whatever her name was, with her friends.
Remember they had a big head.
Yeah.
Oh, right. I also, Michael, I remember a couple of years ago when Ariel Levitas was with us, we had the students this week and we went down and it was great. Yeah,
That was a year ago. Wow.
I know. A lifetime ago.
Well, your PowerPoint training has come in very handy.
I hope it's, yes, thank you. But I think that I actually, as much as I thought this was a good template, because I also thought the colors were like the right Hebrew college colors, I realized it wasn't. I need to scroll back down, peel back down to my.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Beth.
Good morning.
Welcome back. Lovely to see you.
Morning.
Again. Robin's
Here.
with us.
Good morning. Oh, hi, Beth. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Good.
You're in
Hey,
Florida.
Deb.
How are things in Florida?
It's really super hot here. But it's the governor just said that the kids are not going back to school this year, this semester. But they did something stupid like open the beaches.
Yeah, I
I don't
saw
get
that.
it. Doesn't make sense to me, but I'm not going anywhere. Go into the office and I do my, the Shabbat services, and Rabbi and I are doing, Matthew and I are doing Yom HaShoah tomorrow morning or tomorrow at noon, and that's it.
Wow.
I have students. That's what I do
Right.
from home,
Yeah. But you actually go into the office, Beth?
I have been, yeah. There's only a few of us that go in, and our offices are nowhere near one another. So we pretty much, the only interaction I have is with Rabbi Durbin.
Wow. And are you doing Zoom school though for the Hebrew school?
Yes, I did Hebrew school and Sunday school.
Great. All right. So hopefully you'll get some good ideas from us today.
I would love it.
Or maybe you'll share good ideas with us today.
Yeah.
Beth, have you done B'nai Mitzvah online? Or
No, we did one yes. We did one bat mitzvah that was at a family's home, and we live streamed it. But then that was it. Everything else was called off.
And did you participate?
Oh yeah, we were there.
Oh, you were
Rabbi
physically
and I were there. Yeah.
in the kid's house.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a beautiful location. I mean, they live, very affluent family. They live right on the water. It was just her, her brother, her parents, and her grandparents and aunt and uncle, and that was it. So there was really just a minion, and she was nervous, just like as she should be, and we had dolphins in the background, so it was lovely. But yeah. Other than that, nothing else. And we've got a lot of pushback from some of the parents. They say that their kids are doing too much virtual stuff, so they're not coming to Sunday school. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we know where your priorities lie during the school year when we were driving back and forth to school. So
well, nothing new there then.
I did.
So the public schools in Florida are doing online schooling?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I talk to the kids all the time, and they're not happy. They miss their friends, especially the youngers. And I can speak for, myself. My granddaughter is 7.5 and is a social butterfly and very sassy, and she needs that social interaction. So she is not loving this virtual school.
Mm-hmm.
My grandson is 10. He gets up at 8. He does his work. He's done by 10:30, and he's ready to go online with his friends. So there's a huge dynamic difference, especially in the genders. And I'm finding that with a lot of the families where the girls are really craving their friends, whereas the guys can handle it and they're hanging out online. So, yeah. Everybody else doing good?
Yeah.
Yep.
So nice to see you, Beth.
Hi, it was great to see you, Deb.
Hello. Why don't I have more people? Oh, there we go. Oh, hi, Debbie Batesh. Okay, I wasn't seeing everybody in Rachel. Okay. All right, so hi, good morning. I was watching the clock and thinking like we only had 3 people on, but my screen wasn't set up correctly. So good morning, really happy to see everybody. So we are gonna get started. I really appreciate everybody taking the time. Now, of course, why isn't this moving? I'm just gonna flip to the next slide if I can. So good morning, and what we wanted to do this morning is convene again in this community that we started before Pesach. Really appreciate everybody taking the time, making the time during this crazy time. So here's our agenda for the day. We will try, does everyone see my screen? Am I sharing it well? Okay, we will aim to end with our content by about 11:10, and then we'll keep the Zoom open for another 10-15 minutes. If people want to ask questions and just schmooze and make connections, we're happy to do that. So our first activity this morning, if everybody sees my little emojis, and Debbie, have you been able to put the emojis into the chat box, please?
So I've been trying, but I actually don't see that option.
What, to just post it? I sent you them last night as an email also.
Yeah, I'm not sure that copy and pasting them will
okay.
translate over because they're emojis, but.
We can just number them.
Yep, you can,
okay.
Yeah, let's number them.
Okay, so I will, whoops, let me see if I have to get out of present mode. Hold on. I think I screwed up here. Hold on a sec, let me just do that. So as you're thinking about what you saw, so I posted 5 different emojis. Let me just get out of that. Okay, and you can see sort of, I'm not gonna number them because I think I can't get in there right this minute. So number 1 is the emoji with the halo, which sort of means you're feeling angelic and at peace with yourself and ready to help the world. The next one is just your generic smiley, you're feeling great and ready to start the week. The next one is you're feeling a little sad. This is really getting to you. Something's happened in your personal life that maybe is just too much. The next one, of course, is, oh my God. And the last one is, I'm really angry and I just can't even get myself moving. So please choose one. I guess you can find your own emojis on your own keyboard and maybe plug them in. But so as you're doing that, let's see, are people getting to do that? I am having a little challenge here with the share screen and all that. Hold on, let me see if I can get out of it. Give me a second. Hold on. I apologize for the. Hi, Eileen. Good morning.
Morning.
We're putting into the chat our emoji of how we're feeling this morning.
Yep, I'm doing it right now.
Okay, good. I didn't see you in there before. Oh, here, exit. I'm just going to get out of there. Okay, so are people able to find their own emojis?
Can you just scroll down so we can see what they say next to each one under Hineni?
Oh, I didn't say anything there. Whoops.
Oh.
I just gave my interpretation of what they were.
Got
so
it. Right,
okay. So the angelic, I'm feeling pretty good, I'm sad, I'm freaked out, or I'm just totally shut down, okay? All right, and once we've all done that, and for some reason, I'm not sure why I can't get to the chat. Oh wait, maybe over there I can. I can't really see what's going on in the chat while I'm sharing my screen, it looks like.
Try scrolling over your bottom,
Yeah, but
Marion.
yeah, but I'm sharing the screen, so that's.
Marion, you may have to stop sharing to find your
Yeah, I think that's what I have to do. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen to take a look at what's going on in our chat. So thank you. All right, thanks everybody. Good. So 1 being the angelic and 5 being the totally freaked out. Oh, Jerry, I see. Now you live on the route. Yep. Those of us in the Boston area are feeling the sadness of having to cancel the marathon today. Oh, Eileen, you feel guilty. I'm sorry about that too. Oh. Marla, hi, good morning.
You know, I feel so many other people are struggling that to be able to say I'm feeling well and good personally, I'm happy about it, but with a weight.
Yeah. So thank you all for sharing. So I encourage everybody to take a look through the numbers, sort of maybe find someone who's feeling the same way you are, or if you're on the 1 and there's someone on the 4 or the 5, maybe reach out to them in your angelic grace and do that. By all means, reach out on the chat. So what I want us to do for just half a minute right now is just everybody take a nice deep breath, sort of let go of wherever it is you're holding right now and try and center yourself to be present for this community now for the next hour or so. I really think, let's all convene together here. And with that said, I welcome everybody. I'll call people's names and I'll tell people who's next up to introduce themselves and just say your name, where you're from physically, because we do have people from all over the country, and what you're doing professionally right now, and whether you're teaching online or not. So I will start with Hannah Berman. You ready? And Beth, you'll be up next.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So nice to see you. And some people I haven't seen for a while. It's very nice. Yes, so I live in Shire, Massachusetts, and I am Director of Education of a small synagogue in Franklin, a Reformed congregation. And for Sunday mornings, we've been sending out materials for the kids. We have not had online classes just because I thought they would be too much for the kids. But Hebrew, we are doing online, and I'm one of the Hebrew teachers. And that's worked out well. Apart from that, I put a 4 down for how I'm feeling. I just feel really out of sorts and not, I'm usually a go-getter. Until this point, I've been very busy with different things, but now after Pesach, okay, I'm kind of wondering now, what is my focus now? And I'm finding that difficult to kind of figure that out.
Great, well, welcome. Maybe today will help, this session
great.
will help
Thanks.
you focus. All right, Beth, and then Robin, you're on deck.
I'm Beth. I'm in Stuart, Florida, Director of Ed and cantorial soloist. I am teaching online all of the bar and bat mitzvah kids, some of the Hebrew students who want one-on-one, and we are doing Hebrew classes on Wednesday afternoons via Zoom with breakout rooms, and the same with Sunday school.
Great. Robin and Debbie Batesh, you're on deck.
Debbie. I am Robin Khan. I am the Director of Education and Teen Engagement at Temple Israel in Natick. And we are doing Zoom school. And I have been really blown away by our faculty and their agility and flexibility and creativity and willingness to go above and beyond, and feeling actually pretty good about the online stuff that we're doing. Not to say that I don't wish we were in the classroom, but given the tools that we have, I'm excited by actually what lies ahead and how I'm getting a lot of energy, inspiration from thinking about, we can't do it the way we've always done it. So now we're forced to do something different. And that's very exciting to me.
Oh, Robin, I'm so thrilled that that's where you're holding this morning, because that's really pertinent to where we're hoping to go today, too.
Well, I just want to say it's only 10 a.m. and I've yet to look at a newspaper or turn on the news.
Okay.
Disclosure, I have my coffee and my breakfast and a community of educators to be with. So
That was our plan. Great. Debbie, and then Eileen's on deck.
Okay, so Debbie Patesh, I live in Boston. I am not a director of anything at this point in time, but I am working at Temple Emmanuel. Eileen is my boss, my director.
The colleague,
my colleague, my friend, and I'm also at Oabe Shalom. So, but in addition, I'm also doing a lot of tutoring. I mean, today's topic was the most compelling thing to me because it's exactly what I'm thinking about and teaching as I'm teaching online, Zooming for both schools. And I'm actually loving Zooming. It's like really amazing how I think all of us adapted so quickly to it. You know, for afternoon Hebrew school Sunday morning, we're just doing a half hour, 40 minutes. So that's really working because you just pick your topic and it's contained. I'm also doing a lot of tutoring online, and I'm doing adult Hebrew, beginners Hebrew, and it's a 2-hour Zoom session, and I'm loving it, and the students are loving it. So I'm like, Zoom is the way to go in education, guys. At least for now, but I'm anxious to get back to the classroom.
Thank you, Debbie. Fantastic. Eileen, and then Tracy's on deck.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So I echo a lot of what Debbie said, and Debbie, as one of is doing an amazing job, of course, and I always appreciate that. And I have to say, we have a faculty, a wonderful team where everybody came to this with a kind of a broad span of technological skills, and I think at this point everybody's got it. And I think yesterday I had an experience. I kind of pop in and out of the classrooms when everybody's Zooming and spend some time there, and love seeing everybody, love seeing all the kids. But the funniest thing that made me realize that the kids are starting to feel that this is sort of like life in their classrooms was I was in one class yesterday, and a kid said, "Can I go to the bathroom?" The teacher said, "Of course, the kid's in his own house, and it was just so funny that he felt really part of the classroom group and that he could ask that question. So that was, I guess, a sign of the new normal.
Very beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Okay. Tracy and Jerry's on deck.
Good morning, everybody. I just got back from a walk, so my day is starting with a nice big smile. I want to echo a lot of what Robbins said. I'm really amazed at how the teachers have really risen to the occasion here. Really, we struggle sometimes to have them teach outside of the books, and now they have to teach outside of the books, and we've really seen such an improvement. And some of them are still technically having some issues, but more than not, every class is being able to Zoom or have face chats with their teachers every single week. I am a lawyer in my real world, and I am a strictly district court practicing attorney, so I'm completely out of work. So I'm putting all my focus into family and the religious school, and I also tutor 10 students weekly for their bar and bar mitzvah. So staying busy Jewishly, which is nice. And yeah.
Where you're from? Which synagogue?
Oh, Peabody, Massachusetts, Temple Tiferet Shalom. And yeah, I couldn't be happier with how everybody has embraced it, families included. One thing we do continue to struggle with, that there are some families that haven't logged on and Zoomed at all. We haven't heard from them at all. We've reached out to them, we've emailed them, we've called them, and they're just, they're in their own isolation, and we respect that. So, but other than that, we've got a really good turnaround. I do get scared that this is working too well, because we do like a traditional format where we see the kids in person and can do things in person, but it's a great alternative and we know it works. So that's what we're deciding for next year.
Great, thank you. Jerry, thank you. And Lisa's on deck. Jerry?
Hold on, I'm coming. I'll start my video, even though I'm not really ready for my day. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Jerry Robbins. I live in Newton, Massachusetts. I am in 3 different institutions. Educationally, I direct a program that meets at Brandeis and brought that virtual. I am also teaching at Bethel Temple Center in Belmont, where I'm the cantor, and teaching at Ahavai Shalom with Debbie. And what I would say is, I think, to echo what many people have said, that it's an opportunity to look at education in a new way. We had a bonus session yesterday. We were supposed to be off for April vacation, where we did a virtual tour with Beit HaTfutzot Museum in Tel Aviv, and it was outstanding. I highly recommend it. And we encouraged families to invite grandparents and to invite friends, and they did. So we've been getting about 75% attendance on a Sunday, which actually is probably pretty consistent with what we would get on a regular Sunday because of sports and other priorities. So that's also a good thing. We've also had families who've said, yeah, the tech stuff isn't our thing. I definitely think it's going to affect enrollment for next year. And I'm actually leaving. The school's looking at a different staffing model. I'm encouraging them to look at some form of virtual in conjunction with live classrooms, but we have an additional challenge there in that it meets at Brandeis, and if the colleges aren't in session in the fall, they have to stay virtual, and so the impact of whether or not they'll A, retain the families that they could have, and B, attract any new families in this environment, I think is putting the school in a interesting, let's keep it positive, opportunity.
Great. All right, thank you, Jerry. And Lisa. And
Hi.
Marla, you're on deck.
I'm Lisa Mickley. I work at VHS Learning, which is an online learning nonprofit, and we have 20 courses in the Judaic Studies space. In these past 4 or 6 weeks, I would say now, as you all know, there has been a big change, and people are using Zoom learning, but many schools are finding that in addition, they need our work is asynchronous. They need some asynchronous work to go along with that. So we're working with a number of schools and programs to help them to put their content into our learning management system, or put their content online so they can follow up with students in between, especially schools that are finding that their staff have small children at home and are not able to Zoom as much as is required. That probably applies a little more to the day school space, but it applies to every space when you don't have time. So this is allowing schools to continue the work in between the Zoom lessons, and it's kept us very busy and very excited that we can contribute something during this very difficult time.
Great. Well, it's good to see you, Lisa. And Marla.
Hi, Boker Tov, everyone. I'm Marla Olsberg. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you, Marion, for inviting me. I'm here in my role as the manager of the school-to-school partnerships between Boston and Haifa through the Boston Haifa Connection, CJP. And obviously, I'm very interested in this topic that you're going to be discussing today. And it's really nice. I was saying to Marion yesterday that I feel like the Jewish learning is really rocking it over the last month and a half. I get to connect with a lot of teachers on both sides of the ocean, and there's something brewing here. And I think, it'll be interesting your next session when you're talking about the impact of having this experience and what your takeaways are. I'm starting to feel that a little bit coming up now, but I think, this is an opportunity here to reflect and to think about. So I'm looking forward to joining you all today. And a special shout out to Hannah Berman. Hannah and I taught together for over 15 years at South Area Schechter, and it's really great to see you. We'll have to connect afterwards.
Great. Well, I'm just going to welcome my Hebrew College colleagues. I'm not going to unmute you guys because I think we need to get on with our content. So just want to welcome Michael Shire, Rachel Raz, Susie Rodenstein, Deb Skolnick-Einhorn, Lena Ettinger, Susan Morell, and Debbie Ron, who holds us all together in so many ways. So if you don't know my colleagues from Hebrew College, for sure, reach out to them. They're all amazing. Susan was able to teach us a little bit during our last session. Michael taught us last session and will be teaching us today, and Deb will as well. And when and if we're back to in-person stuff, they all teach amazing things locally and internationally online through all of our platforms. So hopefully you'll get to connect with them. So I'm going to turn the session over to Michael now. Do you want me to start sharing your slides, Michael?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Marion.
Yep.
Well, good to everyone. Good morning. Wonderful to be with you all. That, as Marla suggested, that was a very interesting little roundup. Obviously, the mood is changing a little bit to one of crisis to one of opportunity. And as you say, this is going to be a moment to think about and reflect on for the future. We don't need to go back to how things were. We can make change. So that's something to think about. But we're here to talk about history more. Before we do that, I do want to mention the name of one of our colleagues who has passed away from COVID-19, Dr. Deborah Naglow. Deborah Naglow was a adjunct member of our faculty 2013, and she taught our classes on technology in the days when we felt that every student should have an introduction to how to use technology in the classroom. And she was teaching for us just as an adjunct, and I think she did a couple of courses for us and then went on to teach for other institutions like Gribetz College and other places, and tragically passed away at a very young age this past couple of weeks. So we're thinking of her and her family, of course, and all those who are victims of this circumstance that we're all in. We have been around a long time as a people, and therefore we've encountered the event of a plague before a number of times, but particularly around this time of the year, we're thinking of the plague that encompassed the students of Rabbi Akiva. As you know, we're in the time of the Omer, counting the days between Pesach and Shavuot, and in the biblical times, that was a happy time. That was a time when the biblical harvest was coming in, the barley harvest, and that was being celebrated every day by bringing a sheaf of barley to the temple as a form of sacrifice. And the Omer was a time for great rejoicing coming up to Shavuot and the wheat harvest that would then take place. That switched in the rabbinic period, and the happy time between Pesach and Shavuot became a sad time. And the reason it became a time of semi-mourning was because of the text we're now going to look at. This is a text from the Talmud, from Yevamot, and it gives us some, but not all, of the reasons why it switched from being a happy time to a sad time. And we have some questions that we might want to ask of this text. So I'm going to invite you to participate. So unmute yourself and ask questions and be ready to read and think about what we're looking at. Would someone like to start off with this first section of the text? Rabbi Akiva says, somebody like to read that for us? First one to go would be Lisa. Looks like she's unmuted.
Rabbi Akiva says that this verse should be understood as follows. If one studied Torah in his youth, he should study more Torah in his old age. If he had students in his youth, he should have additional students in his old age. As it is stated, in the morning sow your seed, etc. They said by way of example that Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students in an area of land that stretched from Gabat to Antipatris in Judea, and they all died in one period of time because they did not treat each other with respect. Talmud Yevamot 52.
Thank you, Lisa. That's the first little bit of the text. What is the first half of this little statement gives us an educational principle. What would you say is the principle here at stake for Rabbi Akiva? What's he asking us to think about and do educationally?
Lifelong learning.
Say that again, sorry.
Lifelong learning. To continue.
Lifelong learning is definitely what he wants. Can we say more about it?
Lifelong teaching.
Keep always being a teacher.
Right. So if you started, you should carry on. You shouldn't give up. not only should you not give up, but you should actually increase. You should make it bigger. You should, if you had a number of students when you were young, then you should have more students when you're older. It's interesting that there are 4 categories here, which are similar to the 4 categories that we find at Pesach in the Haggadah. The idea of young and old, and of teaching a number and then teaching more. We'll come back to the number 4 later on, but this is a kind of a principle at stake here that Rabbi Akiva's kind of exhorting us to the challenge, as we have just heard, of things that change over time. But then we have a practical example. Could someone tell me what this practical example is all about? What is the example here that is being used to exemplify the principle about Rabbi Akiva?
Gardening, sewing.
Well, he had a bunch of students, but maybe they kept spreading out and didn't keep teaching. Great.
So he did have a lot of students, and he had them all over the place. Gavat to Antipatris pretty much means from the north to Jerusalem, all the way from the northern border, all the way to the north of Jerusalem. So that's a big distance, and he had lots of students, but they all died in one period of time because they didn't treat each other with respect. Lo nahagu kavod ze lazer. So there's something about the relationship between them. There's something about what's happening. So it's not just about the numbers of students, but it's about the quality as well, what's happening between them. All right, let's turn to the next. Yeah, go ahead.
It's Eileen, is it okay?
Eileen,
yeah, I really struggle with texts that blame, that treat plagues as something that somebody deserved for some type of behavior. And just even in terms of how we teach kids about things, to invoke, God raining down a plague. I mean, I know we have the whole Egypt thing with plagues in Egypt, but there's this, I don't know, I can sort of categorize that differently, but I would struggle with this, to kind of take that perspective. I mean, I realize that people would attribute a plague, not understanding the origin and not understanding about transmission of disease, and say it must be because of, so I can sort of attribute it to times. But in general, I would always want to add, personally, some sort of a caveat to that, invoking the death of an entire community of a plague because of that, just a concern of mine.
Right, and of course we're living in a time when that's a potential danger of what we're seeing around us as well. That are we to blame? Is there anyone? Can we ascribe blame for anything that's happening? And that's a very dangerous thing to do. And I agree with you that we would want to be very careful about introducing that idea, that theodicy, God's judgment on the actions that we take. And the Talmud itself is a little bit ambiguous about it. It's not exactly saying what's happening. It does suggest that they didn't teach each other with respect, but what is that respect about? What were they not doing? And we don't know. We don't have an answer to that. We don't know what it was that they were. And if this was due to a plague, what was their behavior that was enabling this plague to spread amongst so many people in such a wide distance area? Again, not ascribing plague, but asking questions, not ascribing blame, but asking questions about what this might be all about. Well, let's go on a little bit. Thank you for raising that, Eileen. That's a really important thing to think about. And let's move forward to a little bit more of the story and see if that helps at all. In fact, Eileen, would you like to read the second piece?
Sure. And the world was desolate of Torah until Rabbi Akiva came to our rabbis in the south and taught his Torah to them. This second group of disciples consisted of Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosei, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. And these are the very ones who upheld the study of Torah at that time. Although Rabbi Akiva's earlier students did not survive, his later disciples were able to transmit the Torah to future generations.
So we see that this is the example of the principle that lifelong teaching and learning is something that's important, because you never know what will happen later on, even if your first attempts didn't succeed. Obviously, this is in a very dramatic way. It's cited here. What's the difference between the second group and the first group of students? What do we know about these rabbis?
They probably respected each other more. They probably worked together more instead of competing to keep the story going, to keep the Torah going. So that's why they continue to survive.
Yep. Yep.
Could I actually also maybe wonder if there was anything about Rabbi Akiva as the teacher who engendered a certain kind of response from his first group of students? Was there something he learned from that did he maybe teach the second group differently, and as a result got a different response in terms of their attitude?
Great question. Yeah, we learn from our experience as we go on as teachers, definitely. Think about the students we've had who've been those in our early years and those that we're dealing with at the moment. Yeah. These particular second group of rabbis are also the ones who are named in the Mishnah. These are the teachers of the Mishnah. They are the writers of the Mishnah themselves. So we have here kind of the main teachers of our tradition, who, in a sense, Rabbi Akiva then becomes the leader of as a second generation of students of his teaching. So we have here a general principle that we need to be thinking about teaching as a lifelong endeavor. We need to be thinking about learning as a lifelong endeavor. We have the opportunity to work with generations of students. So we were talking earlier with Beth about B'nai Mitzvah and students of maybe people that we know who we've worked with in our congregations. So we know that we have that opportunity, we have that challenge, and the opportunity to both increase the number of students and to be thinking about the quality of what we're offering is something to continue to work on. Let's go to the third section of this little story. Someone who would like to read the third section? Maybe Robin?
With regard to the 12,000 pairs of Rabbi Akiva students, the Gemara adds, it is taught that all of them died in the period from Passover until Shavuot. Rav Hama bar Abba said, and some say it was Rabbi Hia ben Avin, they all died a bad death. The Gemara inquires, what is it that is called a bad death? Rab Nahum said, you can read
Askara
is diphtheria.
Is an illness. We don't know exactly what it is. Here they say it's diphtheria. It's actually probably an infection of the lungs, which is a viral disease, and therefore, of course, kind of very similar to what we're encountering at the moment. Obviously, very infectious, very contagious, and it's called a bad death, which unfortunately and tragically is something that we're encountering for those people who are suffering. Now, sometimes in the Talmud, death is not necessarily physical death, but it can be spiritual death. And the Talmud does use this phrase a lot to think about the ways in which people are not just physically coming to the end of their lives, but they have somewhere been stunted in their intellectual or spiritual growth. What do you imagine the idea of a bad death means to the rabbis? Why do they call it a bad death?
Well, as opposed to suffering, as opposed to a good death, maybe dying in your sleep or, unnatural causes. But a bad death to me would mean suffering, whether it be in pain or just, I don't know, just what people are going through now. It's just all of a sudden, one day you're fine and the next day you're not.
Right.
Maybe alone. They're suffering alone.
Right.
They weren't respecting each other. They didn't really have a community, those students. So.
All right. So going back to that first idea that they weren't respecting each other, what does that actually mean? Maybe the death, the spiritual death they were having was by being alone, by not having the opportunity to be with each other or to respect each other and collaborate and work with each other. Yeah. What else could bad death mean, particularly in the light of this idea of not respecting each other?
I'm really struck by the word taught, and Michael, you bolded it. and I think this hooks to what Eileen was commenting on earlier, that we now know in the age of science that you don't die because you had lashon hara, or you didn't respect people, that you die because you get sick, right? But there's a teaching, there's the messaging that comes from these stories to try and sort of make sense of the world and give a lesson. So the lesson here is the bad death is being in a bad community and not respecting each other. So I sort of love that, my read of these ancient texts always is we have to sort of contextualize them where they were coming from, and that they didn't know why people died and they were trying to teach lessons, and that was the point of the Mishnah and the Talmud, to teach lessons. So, sort of to sort of connect those dots, that of course we today know you don't die because you had lashon hara, So I just think that's, the teaching piece in here is crucial to understanding the story.
Right. And this, thank you, Marion, and it goes back to the idea of the principle. This is an example of a principle, and if you like, being an example, a mashal, you can take it or leave it. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, the notion that this period of time between Pesach and Shavuot is a time, or until Lag BaOmer, when the plague lifted traditionally, is a legend, and has come into our tradition as part of our custom, that between Pesach and Lag BaOmer, that certain things are restricted, like weddings and haircuts and those kind of things. But that's become certainly lessened in the modern Jewish community, and the idea of the biblical idea of the Omer, of the celebration of God's bounty for the land in the springtime, has kind of come back to the fore. And we over time in Jewish history, we pick and choose our stories according to how we're feeling. And this story of the semi-mourning, of the death of the students, of the disrespect, or of the lack of learning, or the lack of the ability to teach a generation so that they would endure in their learning, was very much prevalent in times when that was felt in the community. Perhaps we've moved on from there and we don't need this legend anymore. We have it in the background, we can always go back to it, but it's a legend that tells us that teaching and learning is lifelong, that it's really important, but we have to think about the very nature of what we're teaching and the quality of it, and how we adapt it to each and every generation that we come to. Lag BaOmer itself is very hypothetical. It's not entirely clear why the 33rd day is considered the day on which the plague actually lifted, and then the second half of, or the rest of the days of the Omer are considered to be happy days. Again, perhaps one of the few ways in which we can understand that is that if you take the 49 days of the Omer and you remove all the days on which mourning cannot be done, like Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, and the intermediate days of Chol HaMoed, then you have 33. And if you count 33 from Pesach, you get to Lag BaOmer. So that could be a reason why the particular date of Lag BaOmer was then considered to be the break point for this legend to end, and for the Omer to go back to the way it was. So as you can see, our history, our story, our past has different ways of understanding the messages of history. But here we have at heart, at the principle, the idea, and it's not always thought about when thinking about the story, is that the idea that teaching and learning should be lifelong, should have respect, and it should have a value-driven base to what we're trying to do, and that we will all improve in developing that as we go on our journey into Jewish education. So I will leave it there, and happy to work with anyone, any questions afterwards on it.
Yashik Oach, Michael, thank you so much. So yes, please, if you have specific questions that you want to ask Michael, by all means, put them in the chat. And again, at the end, we'll have time for schmoozing and questioning beyond. I'm going to, before I transition to Deb, I'm thinking, did I forget to introduce Susie? I feel like I skipped over you, Susie Rodenstein. So just to acknowledge that Susie, one of our faculty members from Hebrew College, is here as well. Happy to have her here. We're going to now move to our next agenda topic, and Deb's going to share with us some thoughts about the arc of Jewish history and what history can teach us. So Deb, do you want me to share my screen? You unmute yourself, Deb.
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So everyone, Deb Skolnick-Einhorn, our Associate Dean.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. So nice to see you. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I get energy from this kind of thing, so I'm appreciating it.
Okay.
Perfect. So I'm a student of Jewish history and also sociology of American Jews. And so I think a lot about how we behave and how groups of people and communities behave now and how that's rooted and connected to our history. Marion, will you go to the next slide? Because I want to make sure we have enough time to cover everything. Great. So what I want to think about is a little bit, I was trying to ground myself in the Tevye story, right? Where do our ideas about American Jewish life and what it used to be like, what it's like here in America, where do those come from? So I wanted to start with this little piece from Dara Horn's In the Image. And Dara, it's a novel, Dara evokes this mythology that we can talk about in a moment. Robin, would you do read the first paragraph for us, and then Hannah, maybe you could do the second paragraph.
After 2 weeks in this pit, Mr. Rosenthal finally reaches the promised land, and he and all the other Jews on this ship crawled out of their steerage hellhole to go on the deck to see the New York harbor, the place of their dreams. They crowded over to the side of the deck as the ship pulled in right under the Statue of Liberty, and Mr. Rosenthal was as awestruck as everyone else. But
then Mr. Rosenthal noticed that the other Jews on the deck weren't just looking at the Statue of Liberty. Instead, they were actually pushing to the edge of the deck as if they were looking at something in the water. Mr. Rosenthal pushed a little closer, and then he saw why they were all gathered on the side. They were throwing their tefillin overboard because tefillin were something for the old world, and here in the new world, they didn't need them anymore.
Okay, so there's this image that's been around for a few hundred years of there being a huge kind of tefillin cemetery at the bottom of the Atlantic, right? That Jews in the old world were deeply religious, and then there was this shift that happened on the boat. I'd love if everybody has just a piece of paper, or you could do it on a notepad if you want. We just take a moment and imagine this as a shape, right? So like, what is this image of everyone comes on board with their tefillin and lands in America with them completely overboard? If we're thinking about what the shape is of Jewish history, like how does Jewish history evolve? How would you draw the shape? There is not a right answer. Just like what shape comes to mind when you think about this narrative, this particular narrative of Jewish history? One thing in the old country, new country, the tefillin are overboard. And once you have that shape, Tracy has kind of a diamond shape. Am I seeing that correctly, Tracy? Okay, great. I want to try to see everybody. So hold them up. This is the low-tech version, but it works really well. See if anybody else has a shape that they want to share with us. Jerry, I'm seeing a little bit of like a roller coaster shape. Okay, great. Let's see who else. Eileen, will you hold it closer? Circle. Okay, so we have kind of that circle of time, circle of life. And Robin has also a dip, high, kind of like the stock market. Robin, unfortunately. Anyone else I can't see everyone at once, so please be patient with me. If there's anybody else, please speak up if you want to share. Okay, so we have a bunch of different versions. Eileen, will you just speak to why a circle?
Well, it feels that sometimes something that was old and tossed out kind of has a way of coming back. And I guess things that people might have been afraid would not fit in history, when they are able to settle in, feel more comfortable, somehow these things have a way of coming back. And I'll just use tefillin as an example, because it's just from the story, is that it's something that gets talked about a lot at our synagogue. We do stuff with our kids even about tefillin. So
Yep.
I'm not saying, probably I would say maybe an imperfect circle, but the sense that there's this cyclical nature to how things evolve over time, I guess. Which is my thought.
Beautiful. Okay, what about the diamond? Yeah, Tracy, why the diamond?
I picked the diamonds. My thought was that the immigrants are coming from like a smaller place with these big high hopes of what America was going to be like. And then as they get here, it seems like they're leaving getting back to that smaller place and getting rid of what they were bringing with them, Jewishly, like throwing the tefillin over, that they were throwing that old world away and kind of narrowing. So even though they had the opportunity to be part of this melting pot, this really big idea where they could bring their old world to the new world, they're kind of narrowing and maybe assimilation.
Great. Okay. Awesome. And there were so many other ones, and we'll come to a few more. I consider this a bit of the Tevye story, right? So the Tevye story is in many ways our communal narrative and what people know about the old world. They don't know what countries we're talking about necessarily or what the full experience was, but the old world was where people were religious and poor, right? It's actually what Vishniac documented and what so many people grew up with, right? With that coffee table book of Vishniac. And that's actually, that has been debunked because Vishniac actually took a much wider swath of pictures, which are now in a collection at ICP in New York. But ABC, who was trying to raise money off of the old world Jews, wanted to show this image of the poor, pious Jews. So we have, lots of the black and white bearded folks and in this kind of very traditional garb, and not actually the full sense of what life in Eastern Europe was, right? And there were centers of culture and secular culture, and there was Reform Judaism developing, right next door in Western Europe. All these things were happening simultaneously, but very often we have this Tevye narrative of like, the Jews whose kids slowly assimilated and they wanted to marry on their own and keep this kind of downhill slide, right? So Marion, will you go to that next slide? Great, thank you. So we have here what my teacher, Jonathan Sarna, talked about as the Declension Theory, right? That in Eastern Europe, in the old country, everyone was religious. And then as they emigrated, just everything went downhill, right? There's like this downhill story, which so many years later, we can really think about how wrong that was. But that is very often the communal narrative. My grandparents were Orthodox, but I'm Reformed, right? Like this this kind of idea that it's a ladder of observance and that it's just gone down and will continue to go down in America. So in Jonathan Sarna's book, American Judaism, he talks about when he was telling a scholar that he was going to be studying American Judaism, the scholar said, I'll tell you all you need to know about American Jewish history. The Jews came to America, they abandoned their faith, they began to live like Goyim, and after a generation or two, they intermarried and disappeared. And then he says something like, now go and study Talmud, right? Like there's no point to this. So this idea that like everything has simply been a downward spiral into intermarriage and treif food and just, in this ungodly country. I want to look at it a different way. And that's what Sarna taught me to do and what he does. So Marion, will you go one more slide? Can I have another reader? Beth, you want to read for me?
Sure. Over and over again for 350 years, one finds that Jews in America rose to meet the challenges, both internal and external, that threaten Jewish continuity, sometimes paradoxically, by promoting radical discontinuities, casting aside old paradigms. They transformed their faith, reinventing American Judaism in an attempt to make it more appealing, more meaningful, more sensitive to the concerns of the day. It is a story of people struggling to be Americans and Jews, a story of people who lose their faith, and a story of people who regain their faith, a story of assimilation, to be sure, but also a story of revitalization. Sounds like Stuart, Florida.
So let's turn those papers over that you used to map the first. And I'd like to ask you to draw another shape, which is what's the shape that Sarna is describing of American Jewish history thus far? Take a minute if you need to, you might need to read it again. But in contrast to that declension, that arrow downward, what is Sarna describing here? Eileen, you're muted if you're trying to ask a question.
So I guess somewhere in this conversation, is there any differentiation at all between, say, aspects of Jewish life, vitality, community participation, and all of that, and Jewish scholarship, I guess?
Is there any distinction?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's talking about it as a whole bundle.
Yeah.
That scholarship is certainly part of the new story, but it's also, you know, all those other cultural, religious, communal elements that we think of when we think about American Jewish life. So Robin had a twirly with an arrow up. Will you show that again, Robin? Thank you for using a Sharpie. That makes it so easy to see. Okay, that's beautiful. Rachel has a Jewish star, which I want to hear more about. Tracy has two wiggly, kind of almost parallel wiggly lines. Marion has the stock market we'd all like to see. Beth has an overall up. Susan has a little bit of a smile, like a slight smile. I don't know. That's how I'm seeing Susan.
It's supposed to be a bridge.
Oh, it's a bridge. Okay, great.
I see Jerry has her hand up, Deb.
Okay, Lena has a version of the American flag with a Jewish star. And Jerry, what did you want to say, or did you want to show yours?
I was also someone who had sort of the
roller coaster. Yeah.
But you know, I guess part of it is also my lived experience. My grandparents were Orthodox. My parents went from conservative to reform, not reformed.
I was joking about that. Yeah.
I know, of course.
Just want to make sure. Okay.
You know, we raised our kids conservative, and my kids are Orthodox.
Yep.
So, you know, my son lays tefillin every morning, and my daughter davens, and you know, my kashrut isn't good enough for her, and
yep,
the whole pendulum.
Right. So that when you're thinking about that pendulum, you're thinking about it in terms of halachic observance going up and down, right? So that's almost the measure that I hear you talking about.
Well, yes, and also, I mean, with all due respect to Eileen and Debbie and Temple Emmanuel and the experience that we had there, and Pro's Door, you taught my kids that, you know, their experience was also, I think, most influenced by Yavna.
May it meet this summer. That's all I can say. Yeah. I think Jerry froze a bit, but we hear what she's saying. So there are many different measures on which we can look at this, but this recognition, what Sarna is trying to open our eyes to, is it's not a flat line down. It's so much more nuanced than that. And even if we looked at it only in terms of halachic observance, it would be more nuanced than that. But he's looking at it, as Eileen brought up, like on so many different measures, right? So to me, this piece that he writes, like if you read it, will you go back one slide, Marion, if you can, if it's easy? Great. If we read this about today, so if we think about what's happening to the Jewish world right now, we are talking about radical discontinuities, right? A week into this, the Rabbinical Assembly, or a few days in, you couldn't say Kaddish on Zoom. Within days later, you could. You know, people are holding Shiva, and there's so much that's happening that are radical discontinuities from these old paradigms. And this is a moment where those radical discontinuities are actually kind of planting the seeds for something else. So, and it's amazing to come on this Zoom and hear educators, of course, who are the ones who are like, this is an opportunity. I see the energy of my teachers. But if we look at when we're having a tough day, where are we on that roller coaster if we're in a dip? And can we reframe it to think about what's coming next? What comes from those dips? My kids are saying they're bored. And you know what I say to them, which makes them crazy? Good, right? Like my kid who said he was bored last night then sat down and read the New York Times for a little while. Like boredom or frustration or not being able to do things the way that we usually do them is actually, you know, those are the constraints that drive our deeper creativity. And that is the moment kind of as a world that we're in this very difficult moment. And Marion, if you can go to the next slide. You know,
can I offer one thought too?
Yeah, let me just finish the slide, Jerry, and then I'll come right back to you. I see these moments almost as like the dips in the garden, right? Where you plant the seeds and you go low, you have to kind of dig low. And those are the things that sprout up, right? So I'm going to come to you, but I used a graph that was, you know, these very low lows to high highs, and that sometimes we get super focused in the moment we're in now and feeling like we're in the low. And if we can reframe that for us, for our teachers, for the rabbis that lead our communities, for our families, that actually this is the moment when we will be pushed to make our most creative decisions that will forever change the trajectory of Jewish life. That is a moment of empowerment. Jerry, yeah.
So speaking as a clergy person as well, it's been really cool to do online services and see that our Friday night services are getting really good attendance, that people are finding meaning in connecting virtually in ways that I think are filling a gap or something missing that perhaps for some people it wasn't a regular part of their weekly experience.
Yep.
And the second piece is we've now done a couple of Zoom Shivas. And the first one, there were 115 or something like that people there from literally around the world who would not necessarily have been able to share that experience with the family. And last night, was it just last night? Saturday night, we had one for a beloved member of the congregation who'd been a member for 70 years. And it was really so touching as someone who didn't know him to be able to hear these amazing stories of how he had touched and influenced and created community from people in different generations in the shul I serve. And it was so moving.
Yeah, what I noticed in the Zoom Shiva that I went to, and also it's in a community that I don't know so well, and I didn't know this person very well. I think what can happen, you know, everyone's talking about how Zoom can be awkward. And actually, you know, we know as teachers that those pauses are where the stuff comes out, right? Like with the pause, with a little bit of, if you can sit with the awkward a little bit, that's when people can be vulnerable. And so I noticed this, right? Very often in a Shiva, you say, hello, I'm so sorry. And it's all pleasantries, right? And people move on to talking about the more comfortable things. But in a Zoom Shiva, you've got a spotlight on the Avel. And what I saw at least was there was really a deep conversation about that person's life and you know, what that got them to this point and how the death experience was. And so like, are we able to actually go deeper, because we have to sit with the discomfort and we can't just walk away from it, right? We can't just go get a cup of coffee or get a ragalach or something at the shiva. We have to engage with it. And what are the opportunities when we have to kind of sit with the hard moment? What comes out, right? That's as teachers, as people going to shiva. So we have not that much time, and I want to make sure to leave Marion enough time to talk about Yom Ha'atzmaut. But I'd love for people either to put in the chat or quickly, like in a word or two, just Jerry already mentioned too, if others could mention something that they have seen or that they in their head know that they want to create. How are you going to take this moment, or what are you seeing in this moment that makes you confident? Marion, can you go back one slide? That makes you hopeful for the future. What is the seed that's being planted now that you're seeing, or that you yourself are planting, that you think is kind of that future, that what Sarna, as you'll see there, talks about as the revival, right? We have dips, but then they move us toward the revival. So what seeds have you seen planted for that revival? If we can just do a quick whip around or posting in chat.
I think let's do chat if we can, because I am watching the time a little bit. And certainly our next bit of the webinar is very connected to that. So before
I will just say one thing to connect it also to what Michael was saying, right? This is a lot of what we're going to see. Marlo, Lisa are posting. Thank you. Everybody put yours. Is often it's about collaboration, right? So new collaborations, people collaborating across time and space in a way that they wouldn't, because they didn't see that person, or, you know, they're not in the same time zone or whatever. Now suddenly those collaborations can happen. So this is a moment of, you know, struggle and trauma for our communities, but it is also a moment where we are, even if we can't see it on a daily basis, we are planting the seeds for the next great Jewish revival.
Thank you so much, Deb. Yasher kochach to you. Really, I hope everyone is seeing the arc of our session today, of really beginning to craft ourselves as educators, anchored in history, deep history of Mishnaic times, but also our own connections to what we think of as modern history, you know, from the 19th century to today, but really as people who live in the 21st century and educators who live in the 21st century, being the ones who have the agency to move our community forward, the same way that Rabbi Akiva's second group of students moved our community forward. So I really love that Deb prompted us to begin to think about what we can potentially do in the future. And the future may just be next week even, what we can do to change the realities, to move us, you know, up off the chart of the, you know, of the stock market dips and the like, to bring us to some new realities. And in thinking about this time of year, not just about the Omer, like Michael asked us to do, but thinking about, you know, what we fondly call the Yoms, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaShoah, which is tomorrow, of course, Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, which are next week, and sort of to rethink and think about what we have done up until now and what this moment in history is going to allow us to potentially do. And I really also think about our role as teachers. We're the ones that craft the experiences and the stories that our children and their children get to live out and tell. So I just last night pulled together the top two pictures are actually pictures from teachers I've worked with. The one on the left, Beth, you might recognize, it was from Yom HaAtzmaut, I believe last year or the year before, in one of the communities in Florida. They rented out, you know, a whole huge whatever, and, you know, had a whole full-on blowout of thousands of people. Beth, was that like in Palm Beach County or someplace? Do you know? You were shaking your head, but anyway, it was one of our students in Florida shared this with me. And then the other one to the right of that is one of my teachers that I work with actually in Melbourne. So we know that this connection to Israel, celebrating Israel, is something that Jews all around the world celebrate, and we can see these kinds of experiences, the full-on, total arena with thousands of people, or the close connections of teacher and students and wrapping ourselves in the flag of Israel. These are things of the past. Potentially they will be things of our future, but for sure for this year, this is not going to be our experiences on Yom HaAtzmaut. Similarly, I chose the photo of the food, something that I think so many of us rely on in our educational experiences, to have this sort of tangible and tactile experiences. And certainly I don't think any of us are going to be sharing plates of hummus with anybody soon, dipping our hands into the pita and into the hummus with each other. And then last but not least, just really, I was touched by this one image of the flag flying so freely in the beautiful spring buds, and really sort of wishing for that. And, I think all of us, I think the one beautiful thing that's come out of this time of year, being in this horrible situation now, is that at least we do see the buds on the trees coming up. So with these images, I do want us to think about what are the opportunities to move beyond these kinds of images? What kinds of things are we going to be able to do this year with our communities and for our communities? What are the stories we want to begin to share? And really, how do we get to the core of what it is what is the story we are trying to tell during these moments of commemorating and celebrating Jewish history with our community? So I'm going to open it up a little bit for some conversation. Obviously, this is being recorded and we will share, but I'm watching the time. So I do want to just open it up and hear about, and I didn't get a chance yet to read in the chat what you wrote in for Deb, for Deb's prompt, but I really would love to hear, because I'm sure some of you are already planning to do things already, probably tomorrow for Yom HaShoah, but what are you thinking of, either things you've already planned or things that today's session maybe have sparked you to think anew about how do we bring, what's the core idea that we're trying to bring when we celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaShoah, and what kinds of new opportunities does this unusual situation that we're in offer to us? So I'm really going to open it up. I'm sure many of you have already thought about it and are doing stuff. Robin, did you unmute because you wanted to share something?
No.
Okay. Anybody? Oh, I see Jerry said, I'm going to record a session of making hummus. Yes, check out. So what we do have to share with everybody after today's session is a huge shout out to Marla. We compiled a list of many of the virtual tours that are taking place of the music. Yeah, we'll share it afterwards, don't worry. Many of the virtual tours that are happening, and also sort of the drone cameras that you can follow over Jerusalem and all that. We also have a couple of really interesting resources for you to feel connected to the Jewish people. There's a Kahoot that's happening internationally that you have to register for by next week. It's being sponsored by Unpacked Education. I'll send all those links. Yeah, Jerry, you can also Google Maps, of course. And there's also this global Jewish gathering happening on April 29th at 2 p.m. And again, all these links will be in the document that we send out afterwards. So just some thoughts though about what does, obviously, the minute we all sort of switch to Zoom or asynchronous or synchronous learning of all kinds of thoughts, of all kinds of modes, it prompted us to do new things with our practice. And so many of you, when we started this morning, said how, you are really enjoying using these new technologies. And I will echo, I can't remember now who said it this morning already, but just how amazed we've all been, those of us that mentor teachers and work with teachers, like just so amazed how they jumped in to do these kinds of things, and really the fortitude to, whether you are someone who's very technologically savvy or someone who's not technologically savvy, but the fortitude to sort of be present for our students and create new things. So just any ideas about Yom Ha'atzmaut? Anybody already planning something tomorrow for Yom HaShoah? Anyone?
Yeah, so Rabbi Durbin and I are going to be doing a Yom HaShoah service Facebook Live tomorrow at noon. We had planned on having a Holocaust survivor with us. However, he's not technically savvy and chose to not do that. So instead, I'm probably going to take some of the poetry from I Never Saw Another Butterfly and put those in there. We've done a blast to the congregation to let them know that this is what we're doing. And, we've got some music. I mean, I don't have an accompanist, but, Rabbi and I will get together and we'll have our little gathering in the chapel and between the two of us and have a service.
Beth, do you know the music for I Never Saw Another Butterfly?
No.
Gorgeous. I can send it to you if you want. It's in Shire.
Great.
Awesome.
All right, I am watching the time. Thank you, Beth, for sharing that. I'm sure in lots of communities there are lots of things that are being offered. I know that in the Metro West area, Temple Beth Shalom with Allison Poirier, that she's doing some like panel discussion thing. I believe it's this evening. Obviously, there's lots of interesting things happening. But again, I do want to urge you to think about how we can create these memories and experiences for our students. What's the story we want to tell them, and what's the story that we want them to pass on about being connected in community during this time. I think we all know how valuable their connections to each other are, but how Yom Ha'atzmaut, these moments of Jewish history, are a time also to connect with the Jewish people around the world, and how there's this opportunity right now to do that. I want to thank both Michael and Deb for helping frame this morning's conversation and to really share with us some interesting texts. And as we did last week, I want to share, open up now to Jessica Silverberg, one of our cantorial students, to share with us a closing bracha. And again, after we do the bracha together, we'll keep the Zoom open and have, field some questions and comments. So Jessica, I'm going to share my screen so people will have the lyrics. And Jessica, we will turn over to you in a second, okay? And here we go.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you, Michael, for inviting me. Since you brought it up, I just want to note that I'm also the intern at Beth Shalom with Rabbi Allison Poirier, and we are doing a service by Zoom this evening with Temple Beth which also includes David Wolf, and Temple Israel in Natick. For teachers and their students and the students of the students, we ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. And for those who study Torah here and everywhere, may they
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was soul-filling and beautiful. And really, again, the reason we are doing these sessions is because of how valuable we feel all the teachers are, all the ed directors and your students are. So we just really appreciate all the hard work that everybody is doing during this time. I'm going to ask Debbie, if she's still on, to put a link in the chat to a feedback form.
I'm here, Marion. I will post it.
Thank you. Great. So, you know, if you have a few minutes, even this morning, it would be great. Obviously, we use your feedback to craft these sessions. Our next one is scheduled for Monday, May 4th, also at 10 a.m. And our plan for that day is to think about where we go from here. I'm sure many of the congregational schools will be wrapping up shortly thereafter, and to really begin to think about where are we headed. So again, I'm going to, first of all, again, thank you to everybody, to Jessica, to Michael, to Deb, to all of you for making time. I do want to keep the chat open, you know, the Zoom open, and certainly field any questions, any thoughts people are having. For sure, my Hebrew College colleagues, now's your time to pipe on in. Marla, for sure, pipe in with any resources and the like. And again, we'll be sending out this resource list with all the links for things for Yom HaAtzmaut. And that's what we have for this morning. So thank you. But open yourself, unmute yourselves and chime on in, okay?
Marion, do you have our email addresses?
Yeah. Okay. If you think I don't, then put it in the chat. But I think I have every person's email who's on today. Yeah.
Marion?
Yeah.
So I've done an account of everybody that's here, and the only email address that I do not have is Deborah Batesh.
Ah, that's a good point. Yeah, so Debbie, I think I have an old email of yours from Temple Israel.
Otherwise, I'll forward it to my teachers and
Okay,
Debbie.
I'll give, yeah. All right,
Either way.
yeah, I mean, you'll send it to me anyway, so. But you know, let me just send it to you anyway. Can I put it in the chat and you'll take it now?
Yep. That'd be wonderful.
Because that way, yeah, because that way I'll get the mail directly from you anyway.
Awesome, awesome, thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask Lisa Mickley a question?
Lisa,
there you go. Lisa, how were you finding the take up of the online classes, the platform that you have?
So for the most part, the schools are that we're working with and programs are starting with Zoom, so they're not using us quite as much yet. But I have a lot of interest in, you know, next step from schools to start to do two things: one, to upload the content onto our site, and two, to figure out how they can take our content and use it in a modified way. And that's where we are holding. And we're doing that with our general studies courses as well as with Judaic studies.
So do you see an uptick in the fall of your?
I can't tell. I'm working very hard to, you know, I'm only talking to people about the fall when they come to me. I want to make sure that we are here to help people and to be a resource. And I see an uptick because all of the networks that I participate in are talking about having things be different in the fall than they were this fall.
Great, thank you.
We're working now with some summer programs. We're helping Brandeis right now do something in the summer. So we're working on summer programs at this moment.
Right.
Robin, are you trying to say something? You're muted still.
Lisa, is the work that you're doing, I'm trying to understand it, is it like a very fancy version of Google Classroom? Or like, I'm not quite sure that I understand exactly what you're doing.
I mean, I'm happy to, you know, follow up with you if you wanted. I can share with you, but it's online. It's courses that are online in an asynchronous way. It's more like, I don't want to compare it to Khan Academy, but it's sort of like that it's a course that you register for and you have access to the platform. It has a discussion board and blogs and wikis and Dropbox, different ways that students can submit their work, but the content is also there. That's what we have available, but schools are asking us to allow them to put their own content in. So just using our inform, the discussions, the ideas, the ways to, and we are working with them that way too. So it's both the content that we offer and having your own content put into an online form so students can continue between classes. I can show it to you in an online meeting.
I'm just really curious. I feel like I don't. I mean, Marion, is it like the EJS stuff that we did?
Probably. So I haven't been on Lisa's stuff in a while, but it's probably similar to that. But I imagine it's not as sort of, a standard.
I think Schoology is a little bit like our.
No, we're doing a collaborative program with the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, and their online stuff is like all videos that are very highly, high resolution and high, and each one is sort of the same. It's like a 2-minute, a 5 to 7 minute video, and then a discussion of 5 to 7 minutes. I think you probably have much more variety.
We don't use we use videos sometimes. I mean, our Talmud course, the teacher has a video reading a course, but most of the time it's a video the student would access, something more like a TED Talk. The student would listen to a video or read something and then respond to it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think there's a lot more variety, Rob. And I think it is more like our regular Hebrew college classes, which are on Schoology, and then the professors put in all kinds of various activities and ways of learning, whether it's a video or a reading or a discussion or, all that kind of stuff. Anyone else? Marla, do you want to say a word about what's going on in Boston Haifa stuff, or?
Well, the resources that I sent to Marion, I think, will give you a sense of how we're trying to approach this from Boston Haifa, which is really a peoplehood kind of approach of not celebrating Israel like so smallly in your own community, but thinking very widely about the meaning of Israel to the Jewish people, and the importance of having the kids feel like they're part of something bigger. So Marion has a few of the resources that I'm recommending to all our Boston Haifa sites, and we're trying to really encourage connection between Boston and Haifa, but also taking advantage of looking at what is being developed globally for Yom Ha'atzmaut. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of good stuff out there that I've given, to Marion to help. And, I'm happy to answer any questions. Yom Ha'atzmaut is my favorite holiday to plan for and to do. And so really happy to help anybody if you want to think about this further, and getting involved globally. So, if anybody's familiar with Kahoot, there's a Kahoot game that's 30 minutes in length. You don't have to compete. You can compete. You can still use the materials if you decide not to compete globally. So there are definitely things there that are really interactive. And for me, I think that's the approach that for our sites makes a lot of sense.
So I just put the link, it's a Google Doc right now. I just put the link to it in the chat if anyone wants to open it up right now and have it on their browsers later. Again, I will send it as an attachment as well after the webinar. But and as Marla indicated, a lot of the resources she shared with me yesterday, we also added a couple of others. Predominantly, where both Marla and I, two sort of go-to places we have for Israel education is the Center for Israel Education at Emory, and our colleague Rich Walter, and also the I Center, of course. And from the I Center, there's wonderful, amazing stuff about in real-time concerts that are happening in Israel, as well as a lot of resources of music and art, and all kinds of fun stuff there. Okay. Other questions, comments, concerns? Rachel, do you want to say a word about the webinar you're doing later this week?
Yes, so I'm doing several things. One, I saw that educators are really thirsty for professional development and support. So I just offered in several platforms to do Zoom meetings for educators. And we have over 230 people signed up. So people are very, very thirsty for that. I also held many meetings with early childhood directors to figure out what to do with younger grades and what to do with them through Zoom and other best practices in that area. So this is also fascinating, and if your school like to do that. If we're talking about Israel education, we did start the Israel Education Community of Practice in Boston. And so like Lisa is part of that, and several other people. So if you want to join and be part of this ongoing sharing, and we have Google Doc with resources and materials, so let us know. And Lina and I are co-hosting this COP. So let us know and be part of that.
Jerry?
And if you need any, and another thing that what I'm telling to educators, all of these things actually came from a response from people that I heard in the field that are looking for something, and I was kind of like responding. So if there's anything that you find that your community will need, best practices in teaching online or teaching Israel or teaching anything else, I think that, you know, I and some of the other people in the team will be happy to listen and also try to help you with that.
So please do fill out the feedback form. That's the way we can capture that information and plan accordingly. Jerry, did you want to say something?
So just sort of planting a seed, and maybe, and this is, I think, a bigger question and definitely something for either another session or collaboration with CJP or something. I'm so grateful for all of these sessions and all of these opportunities. And I am starting to feel so overwhelmed. I am working harder than ever, longer than ever. And part of it is trying to preserve the communities and for us to remain relevant. And part of it is how do we sort of curate the best content to share with our people, much as we would in any other curriculum assessment. And how do we collaborate without sort of risking our own relevance.
Thanks for saying all that, Jerry.
See you later. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, bye. I'm done. Happy Yom HaShoah.
No, but thank you, Jerry, for saying that, because I will say part of our impetus for pulling together these sessions was exactly from that feeling of sort of when all this started, sort of the barrage of here's like a million things to do, and you know, you better do it tomorrow or else you're going to miss the boat and all that. And really what we're hoping to do, I think we all know we are in a new normal, and things are not, you know, I don't think we're going to see a Yom Ha'atzmaut thing at an arena like that for many years to come. I think that ship sailed. And so what does it mean for what we want to do? And one of our objectives with these sessions was to kind of slow things down and to do the hard work that you just described, Jerry, because again, we are all working like this nonstop 24/7, you know, having Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, and then trying to do the work in between, and et cetera, and remaining relevant and bringing value to our communities and all that. So I think those are the big hard questions. And, you know, that is really, we want this forum to be the forum to have those discussions. And like I said, our next one, which is scheduled for May 4th, was really to begin to think about, and what's going to happen next year, and what about next, you know. And I do think like the collaboration, and people still want to be in small community and be connected to people that they know and have relationships with, and yet we have this opportunity to also harness each other and harness resources from beyond our own little local communities, which I think has been true for decades, of course, but I think this new reality has put that more to the fore. So I am watching the clock, and I know I did promise everybody that 11:30 we'd be done, but for sure we can continue this conversation. Jerry, if you put something like this in the feedback form, I'll definitely remember. And again, of course, we already are planning for May 4th to be something about what happens next. But if you want to spark me more, please put it in the feedback form. And similarly for everybody, you know, please.
I'm also happy to be part of the conversation.
Great. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
That's just in connection with that, Marion. I would say that to me, that if there's the distinction between the small Zoom session like this and the large sessions, like some of the things that Unpack for Educators is doing, where you hear, Natan Sharansky speak, are very inspiring, but they don't have the same impact that something like this. So if we think about building a Yom Ha'atzmaut ceremony for a community, we also have to remember that we need to give time for our students to connect with us in these, I think 12 to 15 people is like the max for a meaningful Zoom meeting.
Well, I mean, to that point, like next week we have what we're calling a virtual legacy fair. We would have had it, all other things being equal. It's our 6th grade program where it's sort of door to door, where they come in, they talk about an influence in their family or among their friends or the family circle, and they're going to present a 2 or 3 minute presentation that would have been like science fair format, all other things being equal, where people would have gone around to each of their presentations. And things that they might have done, like bake a favorite family recipe, won't work, but they could still make a recipe book and talk about why this matters and sort of demonstrate it and then share the recipe so that other people can take it. And then we're doing graduation the following week in the same kind of format. And I'm actually, Robin, this was your idea, so thank you. Robin did a CM for one of my teachers and other teachers as part of a Brandeis program for educators, college students who are educators. And she sent out ahead of time letters to their mentors. And so I'm sending out ahead of time the graduation certificates with instructions for the parents not to open this until the date. And that way the kids will each have their graduation certificate as if it's happening, and we can make it like one big thing. So Robin, thank you. I'm totally stealing that.
Great, great. Robin, you're muted.
Lisa, you just said something that's totally been resonating with me. And in our faculty, it's like I'm sort of caught between like holding two things. We had a faculty meeting last night, and the teachers were saying, wow, like being on Zoom, it makes it so much easier to use technology in the classroom. Like by and large, the internet is better in kids' homes than in our building. Everybody's got their own device. So like, that's all great. And on the other hand, what are we serving by popping in a video and using class time to show a video of whoever? Like I just opened up this Unpacked Education website, which I'm sure has great content, but right now I want our kids to be interacting with us and like teachers and each other, and kind of also struggling with how to figure out the flipped classroom so they can watch this video on their own, but the time that they're in, doing Brady Bunch, they're like actually interacting with each other as much as possible. And then also struggling with only one person can talk at a time. Like, Debbie, you and Eileen might be chatting off to the side. I don't know, maybe you are, but losing a lot of that just sort of like time in passing and how we actually build relationships. And teachers are like, I actually kind of like this. I don't really have to do classroom management. I don't have to take my kindergartners to the bathroom, which takes like 20 minutes, and then schlep them up to the sanctuary and hush them and get them quiet. And then we have to come back downstairs. And like, like there's, everything is, we're teaching in 30-minute increments, and it's, I'm just like sort of struggling, and not struggling, like I'm sort of energized, I guess, by all of that. And
Robin, don't forget the hidden curriculum principle, which is always at work, wherever we are, whether we're online or whether we're in a building. There is something else going on in terms of learning that is part of the curriculum, although we call it the hidden curriculum. So interacting with people physically has a certain sense of what that hidden curriculum is all about. I don't think we've had enough experience to know what the hidden curriculum of the online environment is, but there is one, and we should be more aware of it. So yeah, it's a good point.
Well, I think to the extent that we're modeling flexibility and resilience and sort of continuing to find ways to connect is part of it. And certainly some of the Jewish values around learning and community and Shiva Minyan and things like that are coming through in terms of the hidden or not explicit.
Right. And selection of material and how that material is both chosen and then developed and used in an educational environment. Otherwise, we might as well become Disney and show Disney films.
And I think that harks to Robin's question about the flipped classroom. We can ask children to prepare, whether it's looking at a video or reading something or asking their parents or grandparents a question, but it all falls flat in the water unless we bring that back into the community with them as a community of learners, or either just the community of the teacher and the student themselves. So, I don't know. Robin, I share your concern because I don't know if, certainly in the supplementary school realm, if parents will be willing to sort of say to their children, okay, you're supposed to watch that 15-minute video before Hebrew school, please go do it. Because, I don't know. I mean, what do we do to create those kinds of feeling of reciprocity that, you do that and we provide for you. I think that's one of the challenges of education, of creating that sense of we're all in this together, parents, families, kids, school, teachers, everybody has to play their part. So, these are the big questions. Jerry.
Sorry to dominate with so many questions. I've just been thinking about this so much, as I know so many of you have been. But the other piece of that is the time. Like if parents are saying, or we're learning from research that the attention span online is 30 to 40 minutes, not an hour or 2 hours, then it's, to Michael's point, how much are we teaching and what are we teaching? To your point, if you're using 15 minutes of your 30 to show a video, like how do you say to parents, well, the 15 minutes doesn't count?
Yeah. Speaking of which, I do have another meeting, but so I don't know where people are. You want to stay on? Because I can mute myself and turn my video off, and you can continue. Is that what people want to do?
I'm going to say goodbye and thank you. It's great to see everybody. Marion, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
And thank you all. Again, I hope you all put May 4th on your calendars, and we'll see you then. I mean, for sure, reach out to us, reach out to each other. We can continue these conversations, not on Zoom at a specific time, but, certainly in the ways that we know how to communicate with each other. It's really a pleasure to be with all of you and to be in community together.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe,
well.
stay healthy.
Toda rabah.